Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Raw Sports Quaran-Stream on the 1st of August. I am your head of sport, Josh Sim, and with me we've got two long-time members of the sports team. The recently graduated Joe Spagnoli. How does it feel to have finished?
Honestly, Josh, it barely feels of anything at all, owing to the circumstances that we're in. I'm hoping that it'll hit over the next month or so, but honestly, it doesn't even feel like it's over at this point because it's just such a damp squib ending to 4 years at university. Could be worse though. I'm happy with my final results, so I guess there's that.
There we go, and then we've also got Carl Henningway, our current secretary of Raw, and well, we will get to Brighton, and Carl, I hope you didn't mind me saying, but you're very excited about the transfer business that the club have done so far.
Oh yeah, of course I am. Like, how could I not be? Let's be honest here, but we'll get onto that later, and I'm excited to rant about the only team I know about.
Yeah, we've also got Luke Edwards joining us in a bit as well. So we've got Carl here. Let's start with the bottom of the table. I feel the bottom of the Premier League that recently concluded last Sunday. There we go. There's the bottom seven, if you like. Joe, I guess the big thing was the bottom three. Obviously, it was the final day heartbreak for Bournemouth and Watford. But were they the teams you expected to go down in the end?
I mean, organisationally, yes, they were. I think the Watford sacking Nigel Pearson with just a couple match days to go, despite the fact he'd done about as good of a job of steering them away from relegation as he could have, meant that in a way they almost deserved to go down. Plus, I'm really happy to see one of the Potso's clubs get relegated in one of the top divisions because I just hate their philosophy of sacking managers every couple of months. In terms of their play, Watford have played this year like I thought they would last year. I was predicting Watford to finish 18th last season, and they ended up surprising us all under Javi Grazia. They surprised me this year in the sense that they fell so quickly. But in terms of the teams that have gotten worse since last year, none have gotten worse by quite the same extent that Watford did. It always looked to me like they were going to go down after the first few match days. As for Bournemouth, it's a very controversial relegation by any means. There will be long discussions about that goal that was allowed, the goal that was allowed within the Aston Villa-Sheffield United game, which in the end has relegated AFC Bournemouth. There is another argument to that this is a season based on 38 match days. Bournemouth, on every single one of those, ultimately weren't good enough in the end. Far too many star players letting them down when they really needed it. Although for some reason Nathan Ake has commanded a £43 million transfer to Manchester City. But honestly, yeah, those are the two teams that I thought would go down going into the final day. As for Aston Villa, I mean, the way that they were celebrating when that final game was over, I'm with Roy Keane for once. Absolutely ridiculous to celebrate finishing 17th in a very disappointing Premier League season like that. It was like they'd won the Champions League. Not impressed by them either. But again, just like so many teams in the last few years, they survived on the virtue of the fact there's three teams much worse than them.
Yeah, and obviously one team that, to be fair, got themselves out of that logjam quite early on in this restart was Brighton. Carl, speaking to you as a Brighton fan, going back to maybe the beginning of the restart when you knew you had to kind of put some distance from the relegation zone. Were you concerned by the teams behind you and thinking they might make it challenging? Were you surprised? Did you think that a Bournemouth or Watford had what it took to get themselves out, or was it like Joe, you thought they were probably going to go down in the end?
I was very uncertain. I knew Brighton were in a decent position. We've been in worse places, and I was relatively confident because we came out of the season with the lockdown and everything, and that gave us time to kind of sort out what we were doing with our new players that were genuinely brilliant players. Like we had Lamptey, we had McAllister, who came in. Brighton fans are mad excited about, but never got in the team because for whatever reason, I don't think we were prepared to put them in because they hadn't, learned our style yet or sort of properly integrated. But that sort of gave them a time for us to put them in the team and make them perform. And I think the additions to our team of some good players that weren't necessarily playing a lot has really changed how our team works and has changed the dynamic. We've been playing surprisingly well. And like even at the end of the season, to come away with a 2-1 win at Turf Moor is a huge achievement on its own. Not at the least beating, coming ahead of West Ham and almost creeping up on Palace at the end, which is great fun. But yeah, I was always worried because you could see West Ham were pulling out points towards the end, like right at the end of the last few games, and you can never really judge how things go. With last year, you can never always rule out Bournemouth because of the players they have. They have talent in the team that didn't perform this season, but you can never rule out a cheeky goal from Harry Wilson or Callum Wilson. You can never completely rule that out. But they did prove themselves to be a team worthy of going down this year because no one in their team performed. And to see, as Joe mentioned, Ake going to City for 45 mil, I just that ruffles my feathers. That does. I just do not understand.
Yeah, we will get on. I mean, we can look towards, I guess, which of those players will be keeping themselves in the Premier League and hence moving on. But yeah, it was obviously I mean, you might have mentioned it, Carl, but did you think it was going to go to the final day to decide who? Obviously, Brighton was safe by then, but did you think it was going to go to the final day between Villa, Bournemouth, and Watford? Or, yeah,
I kind of expected because, I mean, given how consistently rubbish lots of the bottom teams have been, it was bound to go down to the last day or to the last few games anyway, even including the teams like Brighton and West Ham. I knew it'd be close to the end because no one was performing well. It was so painfully close for all fans. I mean, it made for an exciting ending, but everyone was on their toes. Everyone was worried.
Yeah, and as Joe mentioned, Aston Villa were very, very delighted to have saved their Premier League status. I mean, you mentioned Bournemouth, Joe, and the players that could be leaving the club. Do we think Eddie Howe leaves the club during the summer? I mean, he's now considering his future, and understandably, he's been at the club for a long time. Do you think he should consider stepping aside for another voice to come in, or should he have the chance to bring them back up again?
With the financial risks of getting relegated from the Premier League, if the Bournemouth board were going to sack Eddie Howe, I feel like they already would have done so. So in the Championship next year, I imagine they'd be willing to give him another chance, especially considering, he's guided them to several seasons of survival in the Premier League, got them into the Premier League in the first place, with a team with infrastructure that should be nowhere near the top division. You could even argue nowhere near the Championship. So in terms of the size of the club, it would make sense for them to keep Eddie Howe around because it may just be that he is the crucial component of that team. And with another manager, they will ultimately may even struggle to survive in the Championship if the financial restrictions on player wages hit them badly. As for, should he leave, there's a feeling going around quite a few people at the moment that Eddie Howe stayed 1 year too long at Bournemouth. Obviously, a lot of links with him in the England job, not exactly an opening at the moment with Gareth Southgate firmly entrenched in that position. But you got the impression that Eddie Howe, after the last couple of impressive survivals, could have gone on to a bigger job. Maybe not a top 6 team, but a bigger team in the Premier League where he wouldn't be fighting against relegation year after year. Now it doesn't really feel that way. He's not had a good season by any means. The failure to extract top performance from really any player in that Bournemouth team this year, it's hard to argue that he's an in-demand manager at the moment. It's another example of, like an English manager that gets hyped an awful lot, but actually after a couple of years, that hype train seems to die away. He's not had a good year. I can't imagine he'll go anywhere impressive this summer.
Interesting, and obviously it does, as we've talked about, Nathan Ake. We can get on to, I guess, what his signing means for City when we get to the top of the table. But Carl, and we'll mention Brighton's summer business. They've been, I guess, one of the more active teams to start the window, with Adam Lallana joining from Liverpool on a free deal, and then Joel Veltman coming from Ajax for, I believe, 900k, which is a bargain, at least, and I'm sure Joe's nodding along. He agrees as well. Addressing your midfield in terms of creativity and addressing your centre-back depth, is that what Brighton needed to? Is that what they needed to address in this window?
I think so. I pretty highly rate our midfield. Like, I've always think Bissouma has been playing brilliantly recently. He's just added a goal to his repertoire, and if he could continue to score, then he'd be absolutely lethal in mid and behind our strikers, however we play them, because we don't play them the same every single game, which really irritates me. But adding someone like Adam Lallana with a lot more sort of a lot more mature player, knows what he's doing, has a bit of a brain on him, and that'll work way better for us, I think. And not only sort of him scoring himself, but a lot of creating chances. I'm quite excited to see what's going to happen. And with Joel Veltman at the back, I really don't understand that. I don't necessarily think we're like, oh yeah, we need more defenders. Yeah. But I don't even think that's true. I think we're just worried that we're going to lose a defender this year. I think we're worried that either Duffy's going to go or a clubman's going to fork out and try and get Ben White. I think a lot of people are looking at Ben White. Apparently, like even big teams like Liverpool and Chelsea have been following his progress over the last year. So I don't actually know where he's going to end up. And Leeds aren't going to get him. We put a massive price tag on him, and he's not going to go. But I think it's a bit of a panic buy, despite the fact that he's a really, really good player, and we got him for such a tiny amount of money. I think that's brilliant that we can get a brilliant player from a club like Ajax for 900k, despite the fact that he is valued at like, I think it's about 7.5 million, sorry, which is unbelievable. And even with Adam Lallana as well, people were surprised that we got him. But the reason I think that we were able to sign him, despite the fact that teams like Everton and Leicester were going for him, was because we offered him the chance to become a coach when he leaves, when his contract ends. Because the thing that Brighton normally have is a really good way of turning a player into a coach after they leave and retire. So we did the same with Bruno, and you saw how well that worked. And he's in the coaching team. He's a really big part of the team still, even after he's retired. And I think Lallana was kind of drawn to that. But even still, Lallana's still like, I don't know whether I'll become a coach. I don't have to make that decision yet. But he has that option there, and I think that was quite attractive to him.
Yeah, and Joe isn't as an outsider looking in. You can tell this is kind of phase 2 of the Graham Potter revolution of the transforming their playing style into that attractive style which is why they appointed him in the first place. What have you made of those 2 signings so far?
I mean, the Joel Veltman signing, I'm kind of with Carl. It indicates that maybe someone is going to be shown the exit door in the next few weeks. I don't think Lewis Dunk is in much danger of going unless a really big team comes in for him. And honestly, in this financial climate, I don't see a big team coming in for him. Carl was talking to me off stream last night about Shane Duffy potentially moving on now that he's fallen out of the team somewhat. He may be the one to go. But the Veltman signing is very impressive. It's hardly unsurprising for a team like Ajax to let go of someone around 28 years of age for far less than their market value, because it's Ajax Amsterdam. They've definitely got someone there to fill the gap, one of the best youth academies in the world. As for Adam Lallana, I think one of the main guarantees that Brighton were able to give him that a team like Leicester or Everton weren't is game time. I can see Adam Lallana stepping into that team over someone like Pascal Gross, who hasn't been as impressive in the last couple of years, becoming a crucial part of that team. Adds an awful lot of leadership as well. He's got one hell of a lot of Premier League experience. I believe this will be his 3rd Premier League club now over the space of about 10 years. So if you need someone to lead that midfield with an awful lot of youngsters like Yves Bissouma, like Steven Alzate, you've got that there. I think Brighton are going to be very busy this summer. There are players I can see leaving the club. They've been linked with an awful lot of exciting young players as well. There's a lot of excitement around Brighton and Hove Albion for next season, not just because of the relatively poor quality of the teams just above them. There's a genuine feeling that Brighton could push for top 10 next year. And when you look at Graham Potter's record with the likes of Ostersunds beforehand, it's not completely out of the realms of possibility. They spend a lot of money. Right now, it looks like they're spending it well. It'll only be time before we can tell how well these new signings have paid off. But I've been impressed so far. Good, intelligent additions for Brighton and Hove Albion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will. I mean, we'll see how the transfer market goes this season, because this summer, rather, it's going to be an interesting one. I guess we can segue, and I know I said we'll get to the top of the table, but this is also a good time. I guess we talk about the bottom of the Premier League. We can start talking about the teams coming up as well from the Championship. And it was a chaotic final day in the Championship, as per usual. I think Swansea had a 5-goal turnaround that somehow pipped Nottingham Forest out of the playoffs, much to our previous interview guest Daniel Taylor, his disappointment. I'm sure Joe as well.
I said they were coming up, so yes.
But yeah, I guess because I've heard from you about the two teams that are going up automatically. Carl, what do you make of Leeds and West Brom coming up? Are you, as someone who supports a team who's kind of mid to low table, are you worried at all by their promotions?
Yeah, I mean, given Brian's last year performance, obviously I'm going to be worried when Leeds are a consistently pretty good team, especially this year, are going to come up and they're going to look strong. And I think they're going to hope to I don't think they're going to make that many changes, but they're going to have a bit of a move around and a bit of change in how they play to make sure that they can sort of match the Premier League style. Because it's obviously we all know it's a completely different vibe to be in the Premier League rather than the Championship. They are good teams, and I'm kind of worried, but I'm also quite excited to have a bit of competition from a massive side like Leeds coming back up to the Premier is huge, and we love to see it. I'm also excited to see West Brom back up because they're a Birmingham team, so we can go see Brighton away. Yeah, we love to see it.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, Joe, when we talked about it, we expected for those teams to get through, albeit West Brom made it a lot harder than it needed to be, but there they are. They will be in the Premier League next year, and yeah, we still don't know the third team. I believe it's tonight or tomorrow. I can't remember.
Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday? Okay. We have Brentford versus Fulham, a kind of a West London battle for that final Premier League spot. What have you? I don't know how much you've caught of those two teams recently, but what have you made from what you've heard of them so far? What do you think about those two teams?
I haven't really heard an awful lot, as you were kind of indicating. As for Brentford and Fulham, Brentford, of course, bottling it on the final day. I believe they lost to Barnsley, who were already confirmed to go down to League One. So pretty embarrassing. And ultimately, it was that loss that led West Bromwich Albion to somehow hang on to that second automatic promotion spot, despite now being 10 points adrift of champions Leeds United. So a bad end to the season for both teams in that regard. As for Fulham, again, Carl and I were talking about this. There's a feeling that Fulham could be kind of the next yo-yo team in and out of the Premier League, a team that obviously get relegated to the Championship after a really bad season and then come back up, spend an awful lot of money. Bear in mind they spent £100 million last time, very little of which paid off, then go down to the Championship, do it all over again and come up, kind of becoming the new West Brom, ironically. I've already said, in terms of teams surviving for next year, only one of them will. I'm fairly sure that Leeds will finish 16th, 17th, do just enough to survive. But I haven't been convinced enough by West Brom's player retention. We've already talked about the likes of Nathan Ferguson confirmed to leave for Crystal Palace on a free transfer. If they can't even hold on to players like him, how are they going to be able to recruit well enough to survive in the Premier League? If they do, I suspect it will be because, like this year, there are so many teams worse than them. As for, Brentford or Fulham, I honestly don't believe they've got enough to stay up for a second season. But we've seen that before from Fulham. Brentford being in the Premier League in and of itself would be a surprise. I imagine they'd be fairly unique, although not necessarily for good reasons if they came up.
Yeah, and you talk about West Brom and player retention. I mean, that's the trap you fall in, isn't it? Because then otherwise you go on a big spending spree, and we've seen the highs and lows of what that can do, especially for a promoted team. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Fulham obviously learn from those mistakes. It'll be interesting to see what West Brom, how they approach it. And because you're seeing a lot of clubs, I guess, go for the sustainable Norwich style model of kind of not trying to spend too big, not trying to spend spending within their means, and then hoping to get by, and then obviously then deal with the parachute payments, whatever, in the Championship. So yeah, Carl, what are your thoughts ahead of this game? Do you have a preference who goes up? Is there a team that a team that you prefer that goes up to the Premier League?
I don't know. I always have most Brighton fans will have a soft spot for Fulham just because Noki's there, because we all love Anthony Knockaert. But I don't know, it's going to be a big game, and it's going to be a really difficult game for Fulham because I think Brentford have been looking pretty strong, especially in the last game against Swansea. No. Who was okay? I've forgotten who they played, but I watched the game, and how did I watch the game and forget it? But yeah, no, they looked really strong, and Fulham just sort of got in despite losing their Cardiff. There we go. They were playing Cardiff. Brentford beat Cardiff, and and Fulham just about got through despite losing to Swansea in the second leg of the playoff game. It's going to be hard, but I think it's going to be difficult to call. You never know, especially in the championship games, just how it always is in the championship.
Yep. Sorry. As you can tell, I'm having lunch while I'm doing the stream. It's great. It's great radio. It's great YouTube content. But yeah, it should be an interesting kind of game. Obviously, Brentford, obviously very attractive footballing style, and their front three, the BMWs, they're dubbing it. That'd be a very, we talk about how kind of front trios are kind of the trend now in modern football, and I'd be very interested to see how they get on in the Premier League. So yeah, that's kind of the top of the championship. Obviously, I don't know, Joe, Carl, do you have any other things that kind of stand out from how the championship ended, be it at the bottom of the table or the teams who missed out or made the playoffs? Is there anything that stands out to you? Or
the fact that Stoke City were able to survive despite playing that badly is a really worrying sign. My uncle follows Stoke City pretty closely. He has been absolutely staggered by how bad they've been, and yet they finished quite comfortably in mid-table. And the same goes for Birmingham City and teams like that. There are a lot of really poor teams in the Championship this year. Not so much towards the top of the table, but 15th on down, it's been pretty dire.
Although, to be fair, I'm looking forward to Birmingham next year. Now, especially Bellingham's gone. He's off to Dortmund, hasn't he?
Mm.
And they were all Birmingham fans were loving him. Like, yeah, we got Jude, like massive player coming up. And they've honestly, I just don't see anything going for Birmingham at the moment. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see if they even stay up next year.
Well, they've retired his jersey, number 22, Jude Bellingham, despite having played just over a century of games for the club. So yeah, Birmingham are definitely making noise off the pitch for sure, and I think they've just appointed Aitor Karanka to the managerial post. Oh, that's a live reaction from Joe. We love to see it. Who else? There's another managerial appointment that's just been made in the championship. Words fail me. But yeah, and also for shout out to Kylan Stillwood, who's Bristol City are now without a manager. And either looking at, I believe it's Chris Hughton or Paul Cook at the front.
No, Chris Hughton. It's Chris Hughton, I think. Is it Chris Hughton? Going to get it. So you're welcome, Kylan.
He's a steady pair of hands, I would say.
Yeah.
So we've looked at the championship. I guess we should mention also that Coventry will be in the championship next year as well. They've had a very good League One season. You might have also seen, I think, on the Ball Sport podcast, I guested on it, a bit of a plug for them, but we talked about the new stadium news that's come about. Joe, Carl, I mean, I know do you briefly have any thoughts on that news, or nah?
It's quite amazing though. Because a lot of money is being invested, and a lot of Warwick Uni students are really salty because they're not spending the money in places that students feel they need it. But apparently it turns out that we are literally only giving them land and not giving them any money, which is a start. At least we're not wasting money on things like that. But apparently there's going to be a good, better infrastructure. There's going to be a train station on campus. But good luck to future students who are going to have to deal with rowdy football fans in the future. Oh dear.
I mean, championship potentially, if they stay in the championship until the stadium's been built, possibly championship football at doorstep, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, if students are living in Heronbank, Lakeside, Sherborne, maybe even the new Cryfield buildings, they're going to have to deal with an awful lot of championship noise on match days, which I imagine will be an issue. I don't know how close. I haven't actually seen where the land is relative to our accommodation, so I don't know how close it's going to be. But yeah, student reaction has been fairly negative for reasons that Carl has already put off. I just think it's incredibly funny that for the second stadium in a row, Coventry City are playing realistically not actually that close to the city of Coventry.
Yeah. We will see how that turns. We will see how the developments kind of come about. I guess we'll swing back up to the top of the table, unless anyone has strong thoughts about the mid-table sides in the Premier League. but it was again another final day fight. We've talked about Liverpool on this show, and when Luke Edwards comes, I'll ask him if he's got any new thoughts on them. But I don't think there's a lot more to add. Manchester City. We can touch upon, Joe. You mentioned that they are set to sign Nathan Ake. They also set to sign Ferran Torres from Valencia for around 20 million or so, which is, again, to me, and Joe, you might want to also have thoughts on this as well. But to me, that's also a bargain considering his age and his talent. City strengthening their squad. They lost Leroy Sané as well, as we've mentioned before. And now have a Champions League tie against Real Madrid ahead of them. So, Joe, given what you made, I guess City were in dominant form towards the end of the season. Do you back them to get the job done against Real Madrid in the second leg?
Not really. The first leg, they were only the better team for the last 10 minutes. Real Madrid really should have put them to the sword, irrespective of how bad their form was in La Liga at the time. So, for me, Real Madrid were the much more impressive team in that game, should have ended up winning it. I suspect in the second leg, with Real Madrid literally being crowned league champions a couple of weeks ago, if form and fitness is on their side, I can see them doing the job against Manchester City. We know how famously good Zinedine Zidane's Real Madrid are in the Champions League, and I honestly do believe that they will knock the final English team out of the Champions League. Then they'll go through. As for the league next season as well, Manchester City. Ferran Torres, you say that's a good signing for the fee of around 20 million, and it is. It's a real bargain for a player of that quality. What a shame that they then have to basically double overspend on Nathan Ake, someone who should not be going for anywhere near 43 million pounds. That's a signing I think we can dissect right now. Honestly, that is one of the most egregious overspends for a centre-back I've seen in recent years. Anyone who's arguing that Man City don't spend the ridiculous fees that United and Liverpool do, I'm sorry, but in terms of like proportional overspend on quality of player, especially after the season he's had, this Nathan Ake signing is almost as egregious as the Harry Maguire one last year. Honestly, what an overspend.
Of course, since we were last on air, we thought the Court of Arbitration of Sport cleared Manchester City from wrongdoing. They did say City, their conduct during the trial, during the whole case was questionable, I believe, to paraphrase them. But they ultimately will be competing in the Champions League and European competitions once again. So is this? I mean, maybe this is something that they've had in the works for a while, and then once that ruling was done, they were bish bash bosh straight into their transfer dealings. But Carl, I know you also had thoughts on the Nathan Ake signing. Go for it. Here's your platform.
Well, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? Like 45 mil for Nathan Ake, a player that has been consistently not very good in a team that's also been consistently not very good. Yeah, there's an argument that last year he had a good season, and yes, that he must have the potential there, but I'm thinking he's peaked, and I don't think he'll be able to get back to how he was playing last season, especially at a team like City. It'll sign him. It'll get, as happened with most City defenders, they start off all right, then probably get a bit worse, and then they're just kind of not really worth anything to anyone anymore. It's so disappointing, though, because there are so many good homegrown defenders knocking about in the Premier League, and they went for Nathan Ake. Just makes no sense to me. And yeah, City are not going to beat Real Madrid. That's not going to happen. They're going to get knocked out, I think. I don't. Especially we know how good Real Madrid can be in the Champions League. I don't see him putting one over on Real Madrid. I think they're going to get knocked out. Yeah,
and I guess I guess this is a bit of we can do a bit of Man City and Real Madrid chat. Joe, Real Madrid were very good towards the end of La Liga, very good, and their defense has been vastly improved from when people remember, Ramos's mistakes and their Ajax defeat and whatever from last year. Vastly improved this year. Do you kind of see what do you see as being the key in that game, the key battle in that game? And you say you think Real Madrid will go through. Why do you give them the edge then?
Madrid need to go for it, obviously being a goal down and having lost at home as well. The away goal at the Etihad will be made all the more crucial. I mean, they need two ultimately to tie with what Manchester City achieved at the Bernabeu. But I do believe Real Madrid have the firepower to do it. When Eden Hazard is basically a bit part player in the team, you know they've got an awful lot of attacking quality. Vinicius, Isco, Benzema alone, that's enough to do one over on Manchester City. As has already been alluded to, I think defence is going to be what's really crucial for them, though. Man City have perennial defensive issues. They just can't physically retain players in the defensive area at the top of their ability, compared to Real Madrid, who in particular after lockdown have been incredibly impressive. Their record with Ferland Mendy in the team at left back throughout the season actually has been very impressive, almost unbeaten and conceding very few goals when he's been playing in that left back position. One of the best left backs in Europe this year. Sergio Ramos, who, yeah, he had mistakes earlier in the season, but after the easing of lockdown has been one of the best defenders in Europe comfortably. You know, they're loaded all across the back line. Rafael Varane, there's an argument to say he's been better than the likes of Virgil van Dijk this season. Definitely one of the best centre-backs in Europe on performance. They look like a complete package again, which is surprising when you consider, you know, the doom that we were spelling for them, even when they were still winning the Champions League under Zidane's first tenure at the club. I mean, I don't think they're guaranteed to go through against Man City by all accounts. I mean, it looked like they were going to win that first leg before City decided to turn it on for 5 minutes. So, you know, it's foreseeable that Manchester City do go through. But in terms of performance this year, link up in the team, balance as well, I just think Real Madrid are such a better team than Manchester City. And in the Champions League especially, Zidane is a great manager. Pep Guardiola, as Manchester City coach, makes fundamental errors year after year in the Champions League. That's why they went out against Tottenham, and I think it'll be why they go out against Real Madrid this year.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. I mean, we also know that Guardiola's contract runs out in 2021, so this kind of is not, if not, this is his penultimate chance of winning a Champions League with City. If then he was to go in 2021, obviously he might sign a new deal and maybe he stays on, but yeah, an interesting time for City, and yeah, their investment in those two players is an interesting one. But we shall see. We shall see how Nathan Ake does. A penny for John Stones' thoughts is what I'm thinking. Surely, and maybe he's the cautionary tale of where their spending in centre backs hasn't gone to plan. Unfortunately, and I'll just bring back the thing up. I think if we move on from City to United, who at the last time we talked, I believe they were 5th or 4th. They were one or the other. They were like borderline, but they managed to get themselves up into 3rd. And we don't have Dan Ralph with us, unfortunately, so he can, you know, wax lyrical about Bruno Fernandes and United. But Joe, I think it was just a case of they had a much easier run in, and they performed when they needed to, and I don't want to sound like a Dan Ralph right now, but Mason Greenwood is a serious talent.
Yeah, I mean, there's real reason to believe that Mason Greenwood is a more exciting talent than Marcus Rashford, which a couple of years ago would have seemed impossible. But especially with form after lockdown, he's kind of snuck up on me as well. I keep hearing about these United youngsters, and I think, yeah, you're overrating them. But Mason Greenwood, I've started looking at him a little bit more closely recently, and my God, that guy is impressive. I can really see him on that right wing for England, you know, in a position where England, I actually think, are fairly weak at the moment. So, you know, that's a real asset for them to have. As for the midfield that we've already alluded to, the addition of Bruno Fernandes, I mean, we don't know whether he's going to do it for a second season. Luke Edwards' caution about Bruno Fernandes is more than justified when you look at how he's performed for the likes of Sporting and Sampdoria and Udinese in the past. But, you know, they do look a lot more complete than they did at the beginning of the season. The question is, will they go on and do anything with it? United have had these rosy periods under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer consistently ever since he was appointed, and then it just gets worse afterwards. So, you know, it's more than foreseeable that they bottle it next year. But in terms of, you know, the way that teams in the Premier League have performed this year, I don't think you'll find too many people salty about the fact that team finished, you know, in the top 4. Definitely deserving of Champions League football in what has been, as I said earlier, a very disappointing season. They're still 15 points behind Man City, but honestly, to overcome such a poor start to the season and to perform as dare I say it, convincingly as they did in the last 10 match days or so. All power to Man United, honestly. They have overspent, but then again, of course they do. Every team in the top 6 basically overspends these days. Be interesting to see if they've got anything coming up over the summer, considering that, you know, in the wake of COVID-19, Man United are one of the very few teams who will not have been affected seriously by it, and they could punish these smaller European teams and take players away from them in a similar vein to what Man City have done with Ferran Torres.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Europa League. We'll do a bit of a preview to that in the back end of this broadcast. Carl, what do we consider Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to be a good manager for Man United? Do we consider him now as someone deserving of the role, or are there still question marks, or did he answer those doubts with the games that they played post lockdown?
There's always going to be question marks, isn't there? Like, especially just because of the dreadful start to the season. But the fact that he's managed to pull it back, like Bruno's really tied the team together. He's opened up a lot of space, and he's really able to play in players like Rashford and especially Greenwood, who's just on fire at the moment. He's an absolute pleasure to watch. There's always going to be question marks around every manager in the top teams. As soon as they lose a few games in a short space of time, everyone's like, oh, sack him. But that's just the culture we have at the moment. There's always going to be question marks. But I don't know. We're with a lot of teams like United, it's all about the passion for the team, and not whether they're a good or quality manager or not. It's whether or not they sort of bring back like the essence of Manchester United. And players do seem like they just work for United now. They don't play. They like to play for the team. They're playing for the manager. They're playing for the club, which is completely different to how everything was previously, where they were just playing because they had to. No, like as we all know, Mourinho is just a dreadful manager, and I think it's just the way that things have been with Ole. They do seem like they actually want to be there for once, and I think I want to look to next season with United. They have a really good opportunity to do really well next year. They're going to be very competitive, and they might even challenge for second place. Seems unlikely that they're going to win, but they have potential to challenge for the top 2 places, which will be absolutely brilliant.
Yes, and before we kind of move on, we do have our final guest here. Luke Edwards joins us now. Hello. Luke, good to see you. I asked this to Joe, but how does it feel to have officially graduated from Warwick University as a student?
Fine. I haven't really had the ceremony yet, so it doesn't feel like it's actually happened. Yeah, I'm still like half expecting to go back in October and just start chilling at work again. No, it's cool. Just on to the next thing now, really.
Yeah, of course. And you've been obviously watching the football intensely over the last few weeks. We had Carl and Joe kind of sound off on the Nathan Ake signing for City. What do you make of City's transfer business so far? Obviously, Ake and Ferran Torres arriving, and also what do you make of their Champions League tie with Real Madrid?
I think we'll touch on Ake in a minute because I have a few interesting thoughts on that. But in terms of Ferran Torres, I think he's a really good signing. £20 million is an absolute steal in this day and age for a player who was probably Valencia's best player last year. Valencia had a terrible season, but he was still by far their most important player. I think he registered 4 goals, 5 assists across the whole calendar year, which is pretty good in a side that largely failed. But I think he's a good signing, particularly for the money. He seems like a pretty fail-safe option. Even if he inexplicably fails at the club, which I don't think he will, I think he'll go on and achieve great things. They'll still have a resale value of around £10 million. They're able to flog him to someone like Real Betis for nothing. So I think he's a good signing, fairly risk-free, and a very much Pep Guardiola player. Fills the Sane gap. We're seeing Ferran Torres most likely start on the right wing, with Raheem Sterling going over to the left, and he'll even fit in with more compete with Riyad Mahrez for that right wing berth. Overall a pretty decent signing for them. On Nathan Ake, I've heard from him. I think it was Sam Lee at The Athletic, who's like the Manchester City correspondent, was saying that Ake's more in there as a kind of squad player. He's useful both right back and left back, which is nice because, let's face it, Benjamin Mendy is a good player when he actually plays and generates a bit of form, but he's injured quite often, so he's quite unreliable in that respect. So it would stop them from having to shift Laporte out into left back or put in Fabian Delphin or someone like that in. Although they sold Delph to Everton, they completely forgot he existed. But bringing in Ake actually gives them that little bit of squad depth in at centre back. So let's say Laporte picks up another injury, they actually have a credible centre back to bring in. So in that respect, a good signing. My question is that they've spent £41 million on a player who is pretty much a backup / rotation option, which, given Manchester City's financial fair play situation of late, where they've been accused of stuff and got away with things seemingly on a few technicalities, it seems a bit like they're rubbing it in the face of UEFA and every other club in Europe a little bit. But on the face of it, a good signing and someone who provides City with a lot of depth going into a clustered 2020-21 season.
Yeah, and just quickly, we were talking about United, but I'll just quickly get your predictions. Any thoughts on Manchester City Real Madrid second leg? Joe and Carl have both backed. They both are backing Real Madrid to overturn the deficit and get the job done.
I think there's a lot of pressure on Real Madrid to get through. I think I would say there's actually less pressure on Real Madrid than Man City. I think Real Madrid very much treating this season as a transition period, bringing in a lot of young players like Eden Hazard, who they brought in, haven't quite hit the ground running quite as well as they would have wanted, but they've managed to bring in the likes of Vinicius Junior, Fede Valverde, have all come in and done really well. So I don't think there's as much pressure, particularly because they've already won the league. With Man City, they are under a lot of pressure to go into the second tie and make sure they come out of it with a good result. I mean, are they playing the second legs at the respective stadiums, not in Lisbon, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be at the Etihad. I was going to say that doesn't really make much difference to City because their supporters barely show up anyway. But I would low key, I would expect Man City to go through. I think getting the victory at the Bernabeu means that realistically they need to get a draw to go through, and I think they have everything at their disposal to do that. Real Madrid, let's not forget they don't have Sergio Ramos for the second leg. After he picked up, he is going to be a massive miss because they're going to need to go into that game with the intention of not conceding a goal. Sergio Ramos tends to show up in those games more so than their other centre-backs, which means we're going to see someone like Rafa Varane partnered with, let's say, Eder Militao, who doesn't have the experience, anywhere near the experience that Sergio Ramos has. And Ramos is a big threat from penalties and things like that as well, so he actually provides a bit of a goal-scoring threat at the other end and shows up and has shown traditionally that he does show up in those games. I'm going to expect Man City to go through. I think if Ramos was there, maybe it's a bit of a different story, but I think that Real Madrid actually have a lot working against them, and there's a lot of pressure on City to go and get the result here. And traditionally, when City have the lead on something, they don't tend to let it go. So I would go with City.
Okay, interesting. And that tie, I think, takes place on Friday, I believe, next week. So we will await the results with keen interest. I guess we've talked about Manchester United, and I don't know if there's really much more to add on Manchester United. We'll talk about Europa League towards the end, as I said. But they got the job done, and so did Chelsea, who also got into fourth place. Christian Pulisic rather looked like one of the most informed players in the league. He was electric. And as we know already, they've made they've done a lot in their transfer business already. So Joe, I guess because we've talked about Chelsea before, was there anything new that came to mind when you saw them over their recent games? Is there anything that that's maybe made you change your mind about them or has solidified a few things?
I mean, my prediction a few weeks ago was that they would finish second and be the closest team to Liverpool next year's season. This was, of course, when we thought that Man City would have a European ban before it was overturned on, shall we say, charitably, some technicalities. I still think Chelsea are pretty nailed on for Champions League next year, looking at the quality and form of teams around them. But challenge maybe for third place. I think it again will be similar to Man United in terms of finishing position, although that's pending another dreadful run of form for Solskjaer's United. I want to say impressed with the signings that Chelsea have brought in. I can see how the likes of Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech fit into that Frank Lampard system. He doesn't mind having diminutive wingers and strikers up front. He's not. It's a big departure from former Chelsea managers signing strikers over 6 feet tall. So I can see the change working there. Honestly, I haven't seen enough of Chelsea towards the end of the season to really give you an answer on that. The concern that I have is the same as many Chelsea fans that I follow on various social medias, that their defence simply hasn't been good enough towards the end of the year. Strong links to sign Ben Chilwell from Leicester, who now they don't have Champions League football, could well make that switch. But for me, as they always seem to do, they need another centre-back. They've just not been convincing enough. Even towards the end of the season, they've conceded too many goals. Chelsea you can see the Frank Lampard development going on, but they're far from a finished product at this point. I don't know what's going to happen in the second leg, but in that first Champions League leg against Bayern Munich, they look like boys against men. Honestly, they're a long way away from being a top quality team at the moment.
Yeah, and we'll touch upon that in just a sec. But as you said, they still have their defensive issues and goalkeeping issues, as we've talked a lot about De Gea over recent weeks. Kepa Arrizabalaga has now become the latest Spanish goalkeeper to have just suffered a sudden loss of form.
Can I jump in on that, actually?
Go on.
Because going into this season, we thought Spain had 3 really, really strong goalkeepers that could compete for that starting position. You've got Kepa at Chelsea, David De Gea and Pau Lopez at AS Roma. In the last few months, especially, every single one of them has had massive issues in terms of their performances. So in terms of the Spain goalkeeping depth chart, seems to have been absolutely gutted in the year 2020 so far. Luke and I were saying that Lopez was the best a couple of months ago. I really would not argue that anymore. Every single one of them
I think.
Unai Simon, yeah. You watch him have a terrible season next year.
It's like the Spanish keeper.
I'll campaign for Pepe Reina. I think he was solid in Aston Villa's last few results. He kept out Arsenal. He kept out Arsenal in that 1-0 win. But anyway, Carl, Luke, obviously, actually, we should talk about the FA Cup final tonight. This evening rather, between Chelsea and Arsenal. And we'll get to. We'll talk about Arsenal, but we can talk about Arsenal now actually as well. We can put them together. Who do you guys have winning the final? Maybe Carl, I'll ask you first. Who do you have winning the final, and what do you make of both teams at the moment?
So I don't think Arsenal are going to come away with a win. I think both teams are going to want to win this because it'll be their first bit of silverware on the shelf with the teams, and I think they'll be looking for it. They will be wanting, but I just think Chelsea are obviously just going to pip against Arsenal because I don't really have much respect for Arsenal anymore, especially because they are not good enough to be where they are. They do not have the quality, and they're going to have a pretty big turnover if they're going to do anything interesting next season. I don't really have much to say about Arsenal. I'm still beefing over certain defenders.
Yeah, I forgot.
Mopé, the career ender, and I love it.
Yeah, we didn't have you on for that to talk about that game, which was it catapulted Neil Mopé into international headlines for sure. Luke, did you learn anything new about Chelsea in their games since our last broadcast, or did it solidify
it's information that Chelsea are very good going forward, but leak far too many goals to be anywhere near the title challenge for the next couple of years. I think the thing is with Chelsea is that they're very much treating, with Frank Lampard at the helm as well, it's very much been treated as a project. They kind of accepted that things for now are not going to be perfect and they're not going to be challenging for league titles like they would otherwise be expecting to be. It's a difficult one. I think they've still got some promising defenders. I've actually been quite impressed with Kurt Zouma recently. I think he is decent. I've not been too impressed with Antonio Rudiger. I think he's probably the one major weak link in Chelsea's backline, which I wouldn't have expected to say a couple of years ago. But I think right now, Chelsea need to be looking at perhaps replacing him and bringing in someone. I think Nathan Ake, for example, would have been perfect for that Chelsea backline, coincidentally. And then when we talk about left back, Joe's mentioned Ben Chilwell has been an option. They've looked at Mark Cucurella, who's currently playing for Getafe. He'd be a really good option because he's used to playing both as a left back and as a left wing back. One of his players, very energetic, very intelligent presser. I think he'd work well in Frank Lampard's system. And the other one's Nicolas Tagliafico at Ajax. And Chelsea seems to be linked with pretty much everyone from Ajax nowadays, ever since they brought in Hakim Ziyech. They're linked with Andre Onana as well, so maybe he could be a bit of a remedy for their defensive issues. But yeah, in terms of what I've learned from Chelsea, going forward, still look very good. They looked at against Liverpool, scoring 3 goals against a traditionally very tight Liverpool defence as no mean feat. And yeah, I've been massively impressed with Mason Mount and Christian Pulisic in particular. I think they're both really good players and players that Lampard will look to build his side around. But they're not going to challenge for meaningful titles like the Champions League, like the Premier League, until they actually sort out their defence. It needs probably another 2 or 3 players in there if they're going to be competing for those honours.
You mentioned Ajax. I mean, they seem to be targeting the Bundesliga as well for whatever young talent. And yeah, you mentioned Rudiger's not been great of late. Probably his biggest contribution recently has been persuading Timo Werner and Havertz to jump ship to join Chelsea. Whether the Havertz deal gets done, I have no idea. I don't think it's going to happen between now and the Europa League. Then, and depending on how far, because Leverkusen won him for the Europa League, so I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, I mean, that Chelsea again, very very good team going forward. It'll be interesting to see what else they do in the transfer market, and maybe we'll see a new goalkeeper and new defenders. Only time will tell. But both of those, we talk about United and Chelsea, and I'll ask Luke and Joe for their FA Cup predictions once we talk about Arsenal. But we should just give a quick mention to Leicester, who slipped out of the top 4, were very much on course to finish 3rd for a long time. In fact, we're 2nd in the league in December, I believe, or January. I turn to I look at the 3 of you. Do any of you have any thoughts on what went wrong for Leicester and what needs to be improved or invested
Injuries.
in? Yeah,
injuries killed them. Having no James Maddison and no Ricardo Pereira, no Ben Chilwell going into the most crucial part of the run-in, Leicester didn't have the squad that other teams had. The reason they were so formidable at the start of the season was because they actually kept those players injury free. Because they don't have really any squad depth, because they're not a big club. Any club who I think is going to be looking to challenge the status quo over the next couple of years. I mean, we saw it with Wolves last season. They're all sides who have good starting 11s, and they're able to put together a starting 11 that sort of flows well. It's tactically astute, but the moment they have 2 or 3 injuries, things just sort of start to derail. And we saw Brendan Rodgers had to switch, and because he ran out of central midfielders, pretty much he had to switch and start playing with a 3 at the back system, which was just awful. They were playing a high line with Wes Morgan and Ryan Bennett at one point. I think it was against Spurs, and those 2 players are just not going to cope well in that system. So what Leicester needed to do, because he was trying to preserve their attacking threat through Jamie Vardy, while also making sure that they had the same defensive system they had, but that didn't suit the personnel anymore because they liked the pace of Soyuncu. So I think what they need to do is just strengthen in depth, but I just wonder if that's going to be possible because Leicester don't have the wages, or probably don't have the finances or the wages to be able to pay good players to be rotation options like Liverpool, like Man City, like Manchester United do. So it's a really difficult situation for them. I think just shrewdness, buying young players, buying players in the Championship is probably the best bet for them. Players who can come in and adapt to the system very quickly and be willing to maybe sit on the bench and work for their chance in the squad. But they can't go and buy the finished product like the big clubs do. And that's what's ultimately has cost them.
You could argue that Nathan Ake would have been a very good signing for Leicester, given that
if they could afford him. But could they afford him? You look at Man City. I don't know what they're paying. They're probably paying 100k plus to sit on their bench. Yeah. Leicester don't have that. They couldn't even. They probably couldn't even fund 100k for him to be in their starting 11. It's a complete discrepancy between the top and middling sides.
Yeah. I don't know. Joe, Carl, I don't know if you have anything more to add on that before we look at the other teams on this ticker. But do you guys have any thoughts on Leicester or
I think we should stop saying that Nathan Ake is a really good option for loads of teams to side, even though he's definitely not. Just because he went somewhere else that isn't Bournemouth. He was terrible this season. He was good last season, but that doesn't count because this is this season. His team and himself were terrible. He is not a good signing for anyone, especially at 40+ million. We need to stop this.
I mean, we talk about Leicester needing options at centre back. Carl.
Well, they were going through Lewis Dunk at one point, weren't they?
Okay. Yes, they were, and obviously we now think Dunk is settled at the club. What about Shane Duffy to Leicester? What would you think of that?
I don't know. I've not really given much thought to it, but I don't know. He's a good defender. I don't know why he fell out of favoritism with Potter. It's just he's not so good on the ball as is Dunk and Webster, which is probably the reason why he doesn't really fit into sort of passing out the back. But I don't know. This last season in which he was playing under Houghton, I think he was the top scoring centre back in the league or something like that, and I thought that was incredible. And I was like, why is he not playing this season? But I don't know. I don't think he's very Leicester. I don't think he'll fit in that form at all. But he probably will go. Fair
enough. I mean, I guess if we move on from Leicester, does anyone, before we talk about FA Cup final, because that's strictly why we're going to talk about Arsenal, because we've talked about Arsenal to death on these broadcasts, except for Carl, who hasn't weighed in on Arsenal as much. But does anyone have any thoughts on Spurs, Wolves, the teams on the ticker left, really? Spurs, Wolves, Arsenal, Sheffield United. Any burning hot takes or any major thoughts?
Chris Wilder's still manager of the season.
Okay. That's a strong shout.
I said earlier that if Sheffield United came back and looked anywhere near the side that they were before lockdown, then Chris Wilder would be manager of the season, and he was.
There we go. So if not, then I guess Carl. We heard from Carl just a bit before about the FA Cup final. Joe, Luke, I don't know who wants to go first, but any predictions and anything that you think will help decide the FA Cup final between those two teams? We'll start with Joe. Oh no!
Honestly, I don't have a prediction at this point because I haven't really seen either of these teams recently. They've kind of been in and out. So the hatred for David Luiz that we were talking about a couple of months ago was then replaced by probably his best performance in the last 3 years in the Premier League. I can't remember what team it was against, but he played probably Arsenal's man of the match in that game. So there's just no way of predicting how Arsenal would turn up at Wembley. The same goes for Chelsea. What I was thinking about was the fact that there was a final between the two last year, and especially in the second half, Chelsea absolutely blitzed Arsenal in the Europa League final. That was under two very different managers, two very different systems, two teams that have made significant changes to their squad since then. I've got no reliable prediction for it whatsoever. I would go into it favouring Chelsea because I think they're the stronger team. But honestly, neither of them are defensively strong enough or consistent enough for me to put my money on them. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I wouldn't be willing to put money on either team.
Is Josh dead?
I believe Josh might be dead.
Oh, I muted myself. This is.
Is it because you're eating again?
I know. Luke, have you got any thoughts on the final?
So this is a really interesting one because ordinarily I'd say I think Chelsea are favourites just because of the differences in league campaigns both sides have had. But I think we've got two sides here who are kind of similar, both very good going forward, but defensively absolutely woeful. It depends on what version of David Luiz shows up for Arsenal, if he's even playing in this game. If he shows up and actually puts in a stellar performance, I think Arsenal could easily win it, particularly because they've got the best striker of either two teams in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. They need to try and get as much space created for him as possible and try and get him maybe even isolating that backline that Chelsea have. Because I don't think that any of those centre-backs, Azpilicueta or Rudiger or even Zuma to an extent, could handle him. So that's got to be Arsenal's key. I think a lot of it will be down to the midfield battle as well. I'll be interested to see what midfield Lampard chooses. Will he stick with Mason Mount? Will he maybe put N'Golo Kante in there? I'm not really sure. I would like I think that's probably where the difference will be. Although we would have said the same thing against Man City, I fully expect Chelsea to have most of the possession in this game. And I think Arteta might allow Chelsea to be on the front foot more so than a traditional Arsenal manager might have done. But I think Chelsea are probably just about favourites. But I think there's going to be, it's like one of those both teams to score. It could go either way, but I think Chelsea are probably marginal favourites.
There we go. Oh, apologies. There we go. So I think Carl and Luke both going Chelsea. Joe is very on the fence. Is it just because it's two not so good English teams going for a title, for a cup trophy, Joe?
It's two English teams that don't really know how to defend consistently. And the fact that, Arsenal and Chelsea can both surprise us in the FA Cup. Both of them have, I say both of them have form in that competition, but again, it's under two different managers, two different systems. Again, there's just not enough of a sample size for me to predict anything. I would say Chelsea, but if Arsenal won, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, there we go. So with that, I guess we'll run through all the English teams involved in Europe. Starting from next week. So we talked about City, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Bayern Munich. Joe alluded to it earlier. Joe, you're going Bayern to get through quite comfortably, I'm guessing. Yep.
Yeah.
Luke and Carl, I assume you also think no different, that it's Bayern's
There's
time.
no way Chelsea get through. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
There we go.
Unless Bayern somehow they come back and all of their players have gained 50 pounds in weight. But Bayern Munich is so good that they should. Yeah. The only thing that I think could harm Bayern Munich and be the biggest detriment is the gap they've had between finishing the Bundesliga and then going and completing the Champions League campaign. That's the only thing that I can see hindering Bayern Munich in this whole campaign.
Yeah, I know they have. It feels like a scratch to them. It doesn't feel like a massive gash, but they are going to be without Benjamin Pavard at right back. So. It'll be interesting to see who fills in. But like I said, Joe, it's a scratch. It's not even a cut. It's just they move on. So there's those two teams are still in the Champions League. I'm just pulling up the path to the final, if you like. But I guess the other two teams in the Europa League, we have Wolves, who we've not mentioned yet, have their second leg at home to Olympiacos. I think it ended 1-1 or 1-1, I believe. In the first leg, I'll just double check that. But how far do we reckon Wolves? I guess this becomes a greater Europa League discussion. But where do we rank Wolves' chances of winning it all come in Germany come the end of August or so?
I think I'm going to go out on a limb. I think Manchester United are probably favourites right now, just because of the difference Bruno's made to their squad and the amount of good form they've had in recent weeks. But I think Wolves aren't too far away. I think they'll be up there. I can't see the path yet, but speaking purely from what I know of the teams that are left in the competition, there's no reason why Wolves couldn't make a semi-finals.
I've got it. So they will play the winner of Sevilla Roma. Should they get past Olympiacos?
That was my point.
Okay. I think they'll run both of those teams close, actually. Roma's form hasn't been great in recent weeks.
19 points out of a possible 21.
Really?
Yeah.
Nah, you shit, mate. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. No.
It's fine.
Sevilla are weird. They've actually been performing quite well. I think they'll run them close, mate. They'll probably go out for one of those teams, which is a shame because I think Wolves, if they got kind of draw, maybe would have got further in the competition.
So yeah, Joe, I think if it's not clear who you think will knock out Wolves, I mean, you clearly hope Roma to get through past Sevilla, and then Wolves. Do you see Wolves as a genuine threat to Roma? Should those two meet up in the quarterfinal?
I mean, yeah, I can definitely see them being a threat. I mean, I see what they did to Torino earlier. I mean, granted, Torino have had a really bad season, but what they did to them in the playoff rounds, I still think Wolves are a threat to, similar to like Atalanta in the Champions League. I think Wolves could be a threat to any big team in the Europa League. I think they'd stand a better chance against Roma than they would against Sevilla, who I think are going to go through the next round anyway. Sevilla have definitely enough to contain Wolves, especially from out wide. I rate Sevilla's fullbacks higher than I rate Roma's. So yeah, I don't think Wolves are going to get too much further. If they could, if Roma get through, I can definitely see them beating us over 2 legs. But Sevilla, I think, will be too much for them.
I just one very quick thing. Could you imagine Jesus Navas marking Adama Traore? I think that could be so funny. I think Navas would die.
Oh no. I was going to say Roma will be without Chris Smalling, your talisman and cult hero.
Doesn't matter. We've got Ibanez. It doesn't matter.
You'll rely on Federico Fazio, who barely made progress at Spurs.
Ibanez and Mancini. We don't need him. It's fine.
There we go. Oh yeah, there we go. The winner of that Wolves / Sevilla / Roma quarterfinal then goes up against Man United, who are 5-0 up in the first. They won 5-0 at LASK from Austria. Should they win, they will go up against Istanbul or Copenhagen, and we expect United to then go through, and then they will play the winner of the Sevilla, Roma, Wolves, Olympiacos quadrant, if you like. Luke, you just said United are favourites. Is that a consensus with everyone? Do we all think United are likely the favourites to win the tournament?
They're not the best team in the competition, but the teams that are better than them don't care about the Europa League. I think Inter are a much stronger team, but they never care about the Europa League. So United would ultimately beat them. Inter could probably go out in the next couple of legs, honestly, because they just never put the effort in. I think, yeah, United probably favourites for it, but not by a massive amount. I would personally not have Sevilla, Roma, even Leverkusen. I wouldn't put them that far behind United.
Interesting. We'll interplay Getafe in the is it round of 16 or quarterfinals? Round of 16.
16.
Yep. Leverkusen they have a 3-1 lead up at Steven Gerrard's Rangers, which I guess we all expect Leverkusen to go through. It's interesting because I think Leverkusen really want to, and I kind of mentioned this during the Chelsea bit. They really want to keep Havertz for the entire tournament, so they're definitely taking it really seriously if they're determined to keep a hold of him. So that's an interesting one to watch. Wolfsburg against Shakhtar Donetsk. Shakhtar lead 2-1 on aggregate, and then Frankfurt versus FC Basel. And as people might know, I'm in Switzerland. Basel don't have a lot much to play. I mean, the Swiss season is coming to an end, but Basel they don't have a lot left to play for in the Swiss league. So it'll be interesting to see if they start turning their attention to the Europa League there. So I guess, do we all... United are probably going to win. Do you reckon? It could be a United-Inter final. That I guess is probably the most.
Inter. I reckon Getafe could do a job on Inter.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a world where Bordalas just goes to Conte. You're not playing football today for both legs. This is just the one leg that they're doing because I know the first leg got postponed, so they didn't actually play it. So they're doing 2 legs because I know some of them it's going to be like the second leg.
I think it'll be. It's not entirely clear, but I'm gonna guess it's one leg.
Just a one-off. If it's a one-off, then I think Getafe are massively benefited from that because I think they can do a job on most teams over just one game. They just take every team to penalties and win and beat them there.
I can.
That'd be very like Bordalas kind of thing to do. He's like budget Simeone.
It's one-legged and it will take place in a neutral venue in Germany. That'll be the 2 ties between Inter Milan and Getafe and Sevilla and Roma. Those are the 2 ties that were affected. Right, so I guess if we've got nothing to add about the Europa League, we can, I guess, circle back to the Champions League. We mentioned the English teams. Let's go through the other kind of big ties left. Let's go for the 2 more round of 16 ties that are still to play, and that is, we'll start with Juventus-Lyon. Lyon have a 1-0 lead heading into Turin. What do we reckon, Joe? What do you think? Juventus should turn it around, right? You'd think.
I mean, they should do, but that game against Lyon is what I always reference when I say, when I reference a bad Juventus performance. That is hands down the worst 90 minutes I've seen from them this year. Absolutely deserving to lose, and luckily they only lost 1-0. I can see them overturning it now that they have been confirmed Serie A champions, and they've been in very good form recently. I mean, the final match day against Roma, who are probably going to rotate the entire team as well, so they will have some form going into it. I can see Lyon going through still, but I would hope that Juventus, with the quality of them, especially going forward in the last few weeks, that they would be able to turn it around. I'm going to say Juventus to go through, but it won't be by more than one goal, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know, Joe. I mean, Luke, do you have any thoughts on Juventus Lyon, or do you also think it's just gonna be Juventus going through?
It could be interesting if Lyon get a goal. Is what I was. I think Juventus will go through because they're quite good at football, and Lyon are average compared to how they have been in previous years. They've not had a very good season in Ligue 1. The one benefit that Lyon have is that they've got Memphis Depay back.
Yes, yeah,
that's quite a big thing. I think, particularly on the counter attack, I think he's suited to that. I think if Juventus are going to struggle, because they're going to try and keep Lyon contained as any Maurizio Sarri would try and do. They dominate possession, don't let them really get a sniff of the ball at all. That I think could serve Lyon quite well, because they're going to be able to sit back and then try and hit Juventus on the counter attack. I would still expect Juventus. I mean, they've got so many big game players in that squad, with the exception of Gonzalo Higuain, but like Dybala, Ronaldo all show up like when it matters. So I think that should just about give Juventus the edge.
Yeah, and Lyon will be without their goal scorer from the first leg, Lucas Toussaint, who's off to Hertha Berlin now. So that's a bit of a loss for them as well.
That's such a weird transfer when you say it like that.
Yeah, well, it was decided in January, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Early one that was already decided. The other round of 16 ties, Barcelona and Napoli. Carl, I just wanted to ask, I don't know if you've seen a lot of Barcelona recently, but what do you think of them? Because they obviously still have like Messi and Suarez, and they have all these great players, but also they've been having a bit of a weird time. So where in your kind of footballing opinion do you rate Barcelona at the moment?
Well, I don't know. I think most of my opinion from Barca just comes with being like an English fan looking at one of like the biggest teams in Europe, being like, wow, Barcelona, look at the amazing players they have. And to quote Luke, they are quite good at football. So you never really know, but they have had a weird time coming out. But I don't know, you'd expect big things still, even though you might not even get them. I don't really have much more to say.
Yeah, no, Joe, we've talked about, Gattuso has really inspired a resurgence in Naples at the moment. But again, Barcelona and Napoli, it's a bit similar to the last tie, isn't it? Barcelona should go through, but we don't know which Barcelona is going to turn up, as Carl said.
Well, we don't know how many of Barcelona's already threadbare squad are actually going to be available for the game, considering that injuries have been a consistent problem for them, although that is partly due to the players that they have signed. So, again, I think this is a much closer game than a lot of people are thinking. People forget the first leg at the San Paolo ended 1-1. Granted, Barcelona have that away goal, but hey, choking in the second leg against Italian teams, it's not like Barcelona haven't done that in recent years. So, I'm going to say this is my outlier. Now that I've had a think about it, I honestly do think Napoli could go through here. Yes, they've not been particularly great in Serie A recently. They're now basically guaranteed to finish 7th. They only get European football as a result of winning the Coppa Italia. But, they have a very strong squad of players underneath them. Gattuso, as you said, has basically revolutionized the team in terms of their efficiency on the pitch. Midfield, they look particularly strong, where they did look poor under Ancelotti. So, yeah, I can 100% see Napoli going through here if Barcelona's off-the-pitch issues rear their ugly head again, which it looks like they're going to be doing for the entire summer. So yeah, that's my outlier for the round of 16. Napoli to pull off a shocker and go through against Barcelona.
I mean, Luke, we're hearing reports about Arthur's now in Brazil, and he doesn't want to play for Barcelona again. Anymore until his transfer completed. You hear about Messi you've heard about his discontent at the end of the season with the club. Is this genuinely the best time for Napoli to come up against Barcelona and, as Joe is predicting, pull off a surprise I wouldn't say an upset, but a surprise result at the Camp Nou.
So I think this is the best time. I agree. I think it's the best time for Napoli to come against Barcelona, but I also think it's the worst time for them to come up against Lionel Messi, because he's going to be fuming going into this match. He's just going to want to go into this match and drag Barcelona, this absolute state of a club, who, without him would be likely competing for Champions League, top 4. They wouldn't even be anywhere near the title without Messi. So I just wonder. I mean, we've seen it so many times where Barcelona have just been terrible, but Messi's been able to drag them through. I just think that this might be one of those occasions. As good as Napoli are defensively, with the likes of Koulibaly and who's the left back? I've completely forgotten his left back name, but I like him.
It depends. There's several left backs there, but Mario Rui is the one that you're thinking of. That's the one.
That's the good one. Yeah, no, I like him. Yeah, I think Messi might, do a job on him. So I'm going to say Barcelona to go through and it'll be because of Messi. Also, they've got Suarez back as well, who's a very good player. Not as good as he used to be, but still, probably a top 5 striker in the world.
One point just quickly on this. We already know that Arthur may not be available for this game because he's back in Brazil. Arturo Vidal got sent off in the first leg. He won't be available either. Barcelona could have some serious shortages in that midfield going into the second leg.
Do they have Pjanic yet?
I've no idea.
I assume not. If Arthur's still technically on their books, I assume Pjanic isn't going to be a thing.
I don't think he's officially moved yet, and I don't think... So I do think he will be still playing for Juventus.
He'd be competition locked, wouldn't he? Because he's at another Champions League team.
It says he's set.
They got rid of that. They got rid of that.
Okay.
That's why Haaland was going to play for Dortmund.
From what Carl, for those who don't know, Carl said don't panic. From what I understand, it looks like Pjanic joins in September. So after the Champions League is over.
Sick.
So that's the round of 16. I guess we'll talk about the 2 quarterfinals that we already know in a sec. But it's funny enough, it'll be Napoli, Barcelona. The winner of that plays Bayern Munich, Chelsea. If it is Bayern Munich versus Barcelona, or if Joe is correct in thinking it's Bayern Munich, Napoli, we expect Bayern Munich to sail through, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll tear Barcelona a new one.
Yep. Not much to add there. And then I guess the other one, the 4 teams we already mentioned before. City, Real Madrid. I mean, Luke's picking City, Carl and Joe picking Real Madrid. The winner of that goes up against Lyon, Juventus. So assuming it's Juventus, Luke, City, Juventus, who goes through?
City, just
okay.
On the basis that I'm thinking Sarri, Guardiola. I like Sarri. I think he's a good manager, but I think Guardiola will just do something to him. I think Guardiola tends to struggle when he comes up against a manager who can do a job on him, like Klopp, like Antonio Conte. But I don't think Sarri could do that.
Yeah,
I don't think Sarri will come up with a specific game plan to play against Man City, and I think you have to do that to an extent nowadays.
It'll be important to note that these are single knockout games now, so these are going to be pretty much decided on the night. Joe, Carl, okay, say it is Real Madrid against Juventus. Who would you pick? I'm going to guess you're going to pick Real Madrid. Would you give them the slight edge?
It's close, but I would say Real Madrid. It depends which version of Ronaldo shows up for Juventus, especially considering it's over one game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could always swing either way, especially with its one game. There's likely to be more upsets than you'd ever expect from the Champions League, just because there's always an upset that can happen in one game, but less likely to happen over 2 games. So especially with Juventus, Real Madrid, it's quite hard to call that one, to be fair.
Yeah, and they'll take place in a neutral venue as well in Portugal and Lisbon. So there's that to get to, there's those pitches to get used to as well. Then going up the bracket, Atalanta PSG. I think that's the tie I'm most looking forward to. And Luke and Joe, the way you guys nod, it's like Cheshire Cat. Now
It's gonna be such a good game. It's gonna be so good.
They couldn't be more different. PSG, some of the most egregious overspenders in world football, owned by the Qataris, versus Atalanta, who have the same wage bill as Reading in the Championship, can play completely differently. I'm so proud of Atalanta, and if Gasperini turns up and decides that PSG aren't going to be able to play football, they could beat anyone. I honestly think Atalanta are more likely to win the Champions League than a lot of the traditional favourites this year, just because no one knows how to play against them. Sorry?
More chance of Barcelona, easily.
Oh, yeah, completely. Atalanta would rip Barcelona apart. I honestly think that.
Right. We should just add, and I was going to ask you predictions, but we should just add that Ilicic will be out for that game. I think he's got muscle discomfort, so I don't know if that changes the prediction or just something to raise. And obviously Mbappe's fitness is in doubt after they picked up an injury against Saint Etienne in the French Cup final recently. So okay, with those two things in mind, I mean, obviously we all want Atalanta to go through. I'm guessing. Do we think it's going to happen?
It could, and that's all that matters.
I think it'll be 6-6 after extra time, and then Atalanta win on penalties, because these two teams are so good going forward. I don't think either defense is going to cope in these games, even without Ilicic. I mean, that's to me just changed it from being, I'm saying 6-6. If Ilicic's playing, maybe it's 7-7. But I genuinely think that it's going to be crazy. I'm really excited for it.
The thing is, both of these teams defend very well, but not well enough to shut out anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Atalanta's defence has low-key been very impressive this year, but against a team of PSG's quality, maybe not. I mean, I'm really hoping it's a goal fest. If this ends up being a 1-1 that goes to extra time or something, I'm gonna feel like I've been shortchanged. But I mean, you've already said it, Josh. This is the knockout tie that I'm waiting to see. Just because you will not find a bigger David and Goliath, financially speaking, in the Champions League this year.
Yeah, I think I think it is the truth that Atalanta, they're the third highest scoring team in Europe, 98 goals at the moment. And they if they score twice against Inter, they'll break the 100-goal barrier, which I think hasn't been done in Serie A since 1951, which is quite staggering for sure. So the final quarterfinal then is RB Leipzig against Atletico Madrid, I guess the anti-Liverpool in terms of Atletico Madrid, and the club that Liverpool chased their star striker of, only that he went to Chelsea. So but obviously Timo Werner's not going to be playing for Leipzig, which is the big thing. Is that going to be the decisive blow that means Atletico likely to go through? Do we think?
Leipzig are good on the counter-attack, and Atletico Madrid don't let you counter-attack against them. I think it's going to be a complete mismatch. Simeone will just stop Leipzig from playing any football they want to play, because he does that very well. And Atletico, I think they're probably the team left in the Champions League who have benefited the most from lockdown, because Simeone's gone back to his drawing board, because they had so many changes over the summer. They sold like 9 first-team players. Some of them have been around for years. And they didn't really have the same tactical identity they used to have. But Simeone went back to the drawing board over lockdown and put together a new tactical masterclass for them. So now they play Marcus Llorente, who's traditionally a defensive midfielder, now plays as a second striker for them, who's done really well. I would bank on Atletico. If it's one game, Simeone's very good at single game management. I think Atletico will probably go through. I'd say comfortably, kind of like a 2-0 or something like that. I don't see Leipzig without Werner doing as well as they would do ordinarily.
Yeah, it should also be mentioned that they've signed Hwang Hee-chan from Salzburg as a replacement, if you like.
How did they get him in? They must have done so much negotiation.
He only cost like 10 million euros, I think. It's a very, very cut price. I wonder why. I wonder if those two.
Yeah, I wonder how they managed to get that. That's really good negotiation from them.
It's not like they share a sponsor or anything.
No.
Anyway, obviously Patrick Schick's status. Joe, do we know if he's staying at Leipzig?
Absolutely no idea. I mean, he will probably be going somewhere this summer. Whether or not it's I think Leipzig are refusing to pay the full like clause that was in that loan deal. But I could see him moving. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened because he clearly loves it over there. They've got the best out of him, which we were never able to. Yeah, I think he will leave. I just don't know whether it'll be Leipzig or not.
And so, I guess Luke was going about Atletico. Do you also think Atletico will do the job on Leipzig then?
Yeah, I echo what Luke says. They're too good defensively. They can also just someone like João Felix. They can find that one crucial goal and sit back. No other team in Europe can do that as well in Europe. Atletico Madrid to go through 1-0 or 2-0.
Right. So I guess in this game of slowly making your way to the final, we now get to the semi-finals, and at the bottom quad, if you like, it then becomes, from what we all think, Bayern Munich against one of City or, well, I don't know. Did we have Real Madrid over Juventus? Is that what you two picked, Joe, Carl?
I was on the fence.
Okay.
So we didn't really have like a legitimate answer to that one.
All right. Do we then think Bayern Munich make the final then against City, Juventus, or Real Madrid, whoever it may be? Up one.
I'd say they're favourites for it against any of them. Not strong favourites by any means, because they're coming up against, teams that have league-winning pedigree. But I would fancy Bayern Munich to beat any of them most times out of 10. I think they're the favourites for the Champions League, personally.
Okay. I'm curious to see who you have in the final against them. That's the one that we'll get to in a sec. But presumably, Luke, Bayern Munich against City, Bayern Munich would probably have the edge over their former manager.
I don't know. With that one. I think I don't have a clue. So one, I like to have a clear-cut opinion in football, but that one I really don't know, because I don't know how Bayern Munich are going to look having had some time off. I don't know. I mean, let's talk about. I think the main battle for me would be in midfield. This is where Pavard's injury could be really crucial, because if Kimmich gets moved to right back, Bayern are automatically at a deficiency there. We don't know what Thiago's head's like, because Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said this week that he is expecting Thiago to leave this summer. So we're literally talking about margins with these two teams, because both of them are very, very good. On the other hand, you have Man City coming up against a big side at a crucial opportunity to make history in their club. Will that impact the mentality of players like Rodri, like Ilkay Gundogan? If let's say they have to play Nicolas Otamendi at centre back, I don't think he's going to have a good time against Robert Lewandowski. I think it's going to come down to margins in that game. And I think when I'm looking at just factors, all the minor factors that are impacting this, because I think on a macro level they're very well matched. I'd probably say City marginally, but I think it's going to be incredibly close. I just think that City, with Laporte back, are a much better side defensively. I think him against Lewandowski will be a really interesting matchup. I'm just gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say Man City to beat Bayern Munich in that semi-final. I think if it's over 2 legs, maybe it's a different story. But I think over one, I probably would say Man City just. Yeah, and I think City would have been able to rotate their squad a little bit better as well, because the game is becoming thick and fast. I think City would have been able to make a couple of changes. Maybe rotating Mahrez onto the wing for Sterling in one of the games, that kind of thing. Just ever so slightly Man City, but
You bring up Thiago, and we haven't had it, I guess, because that kind of transfer rumor came up after our last broadcast. But would you want as you and I both Liverpool fans, but would you want Thiago in Liverpool colours next season?
Yeah, I think he's one of the best midfielders in world football. As he's one of those players, like, I think Liverpool as they are fine and, like, dare I say it, near perfect, but there's always certain players who you make concessions for. There's a bracket of players. So, you look at Liverpool's midfielders, like, it's full of very good midfielders, and there aren't too many midfielders I'd want to change it. But like, if Man City offered us Kevin De Bruyne, you'd snap up Kevin De Bruyne. And it's the same thing with Thiago. If you're offered Thiago Alcantara and he wants to join your club, you do whatever you can to make that happen. So, in my opinion, if Thiago wants to join Liverpool, then Thiago should join Liverpool, and he should go and become Liverpool's main central midfielder and become even more of a legendary midfielder than he currently is. I want him at Liverpool badly.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one, obviously, and Joe will know, obviously, Liverpool like to sign younger players or players that can develop further into excellent ones. And it would be an interesting departure from their transfer policy. It's funny because your comment, Luke, your Bayern Munich insight there reminded me of Karl-Heinz Rummenigge's comment on David Alaba recently, which are really laughable and really confusing. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to hear them. I'll just read them out quickly. In my opinion, David is something like the Black Franz Beckenbauer. He's the first player who seizes the reins and whose personality is also developed in such a fantastic way, and who, on account of his skin color, has the chance in the age of Black Lives Matter to take on a special role. David knows what he has in FC Bayern, and we know what we have in David. So, yeah, I was very confused by those, as if David Alaba should stay at Bayern to do something special for Black Lives Matter, to be a commanding figure for the club in this age for Bayern, which is a very strange set of comments.
I don't know if I like the sentiment of him being as good as Franz Beckenbauer, but I don't know if, or like having the same impact, but I don't think race has to do anything to do with it.
Yeah, that was the
I think he's trying to make a positive message, but he's just gone about it in the wrong way.
Yeah. So Bayern. Okay, so then we swinging back to the other half. I mean, Atalanta PSG, the winner of that versus Atletico, I'm guessing is the consensus. I mean, if Atalanta could overcome Atletico Madrid, it'd be a great story if they made the final. But then again, Atletico, as we've said, are very good at defending against attacking sides. So where do we think? Do we think Atletico have a good chance against whoever it is, PSG or Atalanta?
Yeah, because if there's anyone who can stop either of those two teams from playing football, it's Atletico Madrid. That's a real clash of styles. Maybe not so much on styles, but on priorities and where both managers place their emphasis on their teams. If it's Tuchel versus Simeone, Tuchel loves his attacking footballers, the players he got to work with Dortmund, players he's got to work with at PSG. But if there's anyone who can stop Neymar, if there's anyone who can stop Mbappe, then it's going to be Simeone figuring out something incredibly clever to just make sure that those two don't really get to do what they want to do on the pitch, which I think PSG are really dependent on. I don't think tactically going forward they are anything revolutionary. I just think they have some of the best attacking personnel in football. So I can just see Simeone doing something. I would actually bank on Atletico beating either of those two teams.
I mean, the irony we're going to have is Kieran Trippier is going to make it further in the Champions League than any of the English clubs, which is... It just tells you, I guess,
in the final.
Oh yeah, you do. Sorry, you do. But yeah, if the other two, I guess it shows that Trippier maybe made the right decision in leaving Spurs. Let's go, Joe. Are you of a similar mind that Atletico will probably do the job on whoever it is, Atalanta or PSG?
I mean, Atletico are very good at closing down attacking football. I just don't know if Simeone will have ever had to deal with the kind of attacking football that Gasperini puts forward at Atalanta. So if they can do what seems unthinkable against PSG, that is, again, a match I want to see, because one of those styles will prevail. It will either be Atletico completely shutting out Atalanta or Atalanta just completely carving through them. I mean, both of which seem improbable, but that's probably just how the game is going to go, especially if it's over one leg. I think Atletico, it sounds weird. I'm not saying that Atalanta are better than PSG, because I don't think that. And I would honestly err on the side of PSG going through over Atalanta. But stylistically, I think Simeone would have a harder time figuring out Atalanta than he would PSG. Again, I'm with Luke. I think Atletico are on paper the strongest in terms of European pedigree to go through as the second team in that final. But again, it's far from an easy road. And it's the biggest cliche because they can just do it in any competition, but Atalanta could do that to anyone. And if they could do that to Valencia and teams like Shakhtar and Man City in the group stage, they can do it against PSG and Atletico Madrid. So, they're the underdogs, but by all accounts, I think they could still make it. If it was a Bayern Munich Atalanta final, I wouldn't be surprised. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I guess if we then look to the final, I'm guessing you have City or Bayern over Atletico or PSG or Atalanta. Is that am I right in thinking it's going to be that team in the bottom half who's going to probably make it all the way?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Interesting. Well, I guess that's our Champions League preview. I do want to end with a bit of a quick fire transfer game, if you like. I'm just going to throw out a couple names off the top of my head, and you guys just tell me if they're going to stay, if they're going to go, and if they're going to go somewhere, where do you think they'll end up? So we'll start with a name Carl knows very well. And granted, if he goes, it'll be probably a loan deal. But Ben White, stay or go?
Oh, he's staying at Brighton.
Is he staying at Brighton for next season?
Yeah, Potter's like, he is out. He's literally said in an interview, yes, he's been good at Leeds, but he is ours. We have plans for him. He's literally claimed extreme ownership over Ben White, and I love that.
The thing is, Brighton have like 5 billion centre backs now.
Yeah, no,
you have so many centre backs. Like, you just brought in Veltman as well. Like, I don't understand how you're going to fit them all. Are you going to play 3 at the back? Like, I don't know. I think he should stay at Brighton. If they shouldn't send him out on loan. Like, they either keep him, because Leeds are going to be fighting for similar positions to Brighton next season anyway. So I think Brighton should keep a hold of him merely for the sake of weakening a rival, if nothing else. Unless Leeds pay them, I think, upwards of £30 million because they're a direct rival. I think you have to put, and just also how important Ben White's been to Leeds. I think he's brilliant. Brighton would be stupid to sell him for less than that to a direct rival. So I would expect him to stay.
Would you pay a Nathan Ake price for Ben White?
No, but I think Brighton could charge a Nathan Ake price to a side that's close to them. Okay. Because it's like, as I was talking with me and Joe, it's like the equivalent of a relegation 6-pointer, but in transfer form, where you're not just losing a player, you're giving them to someone to directly strengthen a rival. So they could probably charge upwards of 30 million for him.
Okay, Joe.
Which I don't think Leeds would have the funds for.
Do you have any thoughts, or should we move on to the next name?
He won't go out on loan simply because he's too good. I imagine he will stay because Brighton are definitely going to sell 1 or 2 centre-backs this summer. Okay. They have to.
All right. Next name, Jack Grealish. Stay or go?
I'm going to say stay, Jack Grealish. I don't see anyone forking out the money for him. Okay. I think Villa get relegated next season, but I think Jack Grealish probably... I think Villa are probably going to get relegated next season. I think they've been gutsy at this stage in the season, to their credit, but I don't know if they would have it in them. They're going to be in a relegation battle again next year. They've not spent their money well. Bringing in Wesley and Samatta, they've not been anywhere near the quality of strikers that they've needed them to be. I think they were like half hoping that both of them would become like the next Benteke. It hasn't happened. The thing is with Grealish, now Villa have said, I think they've gone down. Grealish is gone. I don't see him going back down to the Championship. But the thing is that realistically, Villa would be mugging themselves off to sell Grealish for a price less than £50 million. I don't see anyone forking out that amount of money for him. Manchester United might. I think they'd be stupid to do that. As much as Grealish is a homegrown talent and a very good player, they don't need him. I've seen Manchester United fans arguing, oh yeah, he'd just be like a rotation option. You know, you got to have you don't. I don't know if United even now, like we talk about the spending power Manchester United have. They have so much of it, but I don't see even now, them having the funds in this post-COVID world to go and splash that much money on a player who wouldn't be a guaranteed starter for them. I just don't see it. So I'm going to say tentatively he'll stay unless Villa decides to drop their asking price because they realise they need money in.
Okay, Carl, Joe, any thoughts on Jack Grealish?
I think he pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I just don't think anyone would want to pay that amount for Grealish unless it's a whole kind of City paying more money than they should situation. Not saying the City would ever want him, because no. But I just don't think he'd go anywhere. I don't think anyone's really that interested in that needing of him that they'd pay that much money to get him.
Okay, Joe.
He stays because he commands too big an asking price, and he's nowhere near as good as people say he is.
Okay.
Also,
hot
I don't
take,
see him
Joe.
forcing through a move away from his boyhood club.
No.
I don't see him
Right.
handing in a transfer request and leaving in disgrace. I don't think that
He's
as much as he's obviously a bad person through the whole lockdown thing and is just like hair and shin pads in general. I sounded very Graham Souness then. I don't see him forcing away a move away from Man. I think he loves the club too much.
I think
Alright.
just the final point on this, and Luke will know who I'm talking about here. He reminds me a lot of Domenico Berardi, the Sassuolo captain, in the sense that he is big because he is the captain of a smaller club. If he was to move to a Tottenham, a Man United, a Man City, he'd be nothing. For that reason, he will stay at Aston Villa.
Okay.
That's a good analogy.
Okay.
I like that.
Good, yeah. Wilfred Zaha.
I was just about to say that is big Zaha vibes, being a big fish in a small pond, and if moving somewhere else, he'd be a medium-sized fish in a massive pond. He won't go anywhere. No one's going to pay that amount of price for him with so much money having to go to Manchester United because of a brilliant clause they put into his signing contract. He's staying. There's no one's even interested in him still. No one's been interested in him since, I don't know. Me and Joe actually discussed this yesterday. There's no one's been interested in him for ages. He's going to stay there and drain money from Palace. And we love it.
So I think, he's probably another one you're going to bring up later, Josh, but I think Zaha depends entirely on Jadon Sancho. I think if Sancho leaves Dortmund go for Zaha.
Really? Oh, that'd be very interesting.
Because Dortmund have already expressed their interest in buying him before. It just depends on if Sancho leaves. I don't think Palace would charge as much to a Bundesliga club as they would to a Premier League side. I think they'd probably be willing to sell him for a little bit less. So I personally see. It depends on the Sancho deal. Because I think they're the only club that I can see Zaha going to. Because I don't think Arsenal wouldn't go for him. I don't think Arsenal have the money. But looking at other top six club, I don't think Mourinho would pick him up. Manchester United don't need him, and they prefer Sancho anyway. And he's painted at that club. I don't see PSG are interested.
I think they were linked with him at one stage. I don't know if they still
does he
have
want
him.
to play, or does he just want to sort of sit and collect money? Because that's what he'd be doing at PSG. Because I don't see him breaking into that starting 11.
Much like Eric Choupo-Moting does currently. Joe.
Yeah, but Choupo-Moting is a great player. So.
See, I can still see him going, despite Carl and I talking about this. What Carl was referencing, I was going on Transfermarkt, and there were no concrete, strong links for Wilfried Zaha for any club since Chelsea in November. So it's not like the interest that is usually there is there to the same extent. With that said, I can still see him going. I don't really have a prediction for this. If he goes anywhere, I think Everton is an option on account of the fact that he's been linked with that move before, and Alex Iwobi has been an absolute disaster of a signing for them. They may want to recoup something. So yeah, I can see Zaha moving to Everton, but as Carl says, the interest is not as strong as it once was.
40 million, Alex Iwobi cost.
Let's put it this way. He's the worst signing of the Premier League this year.
Yeah, is he flop of the season?
I think he's a worse signing than Ndombele. He's a worse signing than Keane. He's a worse signing than Joe Linton. It never made sense at the time.
I think with all those players, like they could come good. Like if Joe Linton, I think if he gets a different manager who uses him properly, he could become okay. With Iwobi, I don't see him becoming like anything substantial. He's just he's so mid-table. He's aggressively mid-table.
Oh wow. After Zaha, let's go. Here's an interesting one. Ciro Immobile, because apparently
stays.
You reckon he stays at Lazio? Okay.
Who's going to buy him?
Apparently Ancelotti wants him at Everton.
Why would you go? You'd be leaving Champions League football to go and play for Everton. He leaves. I mean, I love Liverpool. I love the city. I've got so much family there. But Rome, Liverpool, that's all.
Okay, that was a quick one.
What does Carl think?
Yeah, stay.
We mentioned his name before, Kai Havertz.
Leave. Chelsea.
I need to look at when the transfer window closes. I believe it closes in October, but I just want to check. So I'm just going to check that while you have a think of who,
It does.
where.
It does.
Yeah.
It does close in October.
October.
It might be
Okay.
late September for international deals, and then like early October for deals between
I thought it
like.
was 5th of. I think I genuinely looked at this today. It was the 5th of October for international, and then like
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right.
2
That
weeks
sounds about
later for domestic.
right. Fair enough. Yeah, that sounds about right.
The only thing for me with the Havertz deal is that it's going to take place after the Europa League, which could be early September, could be late August, by which point the Bundesliga, because that starts before the Premier League, I think. So it'll be interesting. I mean, yeah, Joe, Carl, do you think Havertz gets to Chelsea before the window shuts?
Carl?
I don't know. They'll be furiously trying, but it's anyone's call if whether he will or not.
Do we think Chelsea will go all in for Havertz, even though, as Joe mentioned before, that there are deficiencies at the back that need to be addressed, and they've been linked with obviously other players to fill those deficiencies up? But do we still think Havertz is their number one target?
It shouldn't be,
Hmm.
but
It should be.
probably
Yeah.
is. I think he is, because I think he's. I mean, if you're Chelsea, like getting Havertz in, he's a bit good. Like he's a kind of player you could sell shirts of for many years to come.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Chelsea want him, because I think he's a very marketable signing. He's a kind of player who'd be a real statement of, I mean, as good as Ziyech and Werner are, and I think they're really good signings, Havertz would be a very different signing for Chelsea to make. They tend to go for kind of like very much finished product star players like Ziyech and Werner are. Whereas with Havertz is really like going for a kind of Mbappe level deal where you bring in a player who's going to be a world beater for many years to come and is a real like representative of the investment they're making in Frank Lampard as a manager. I think he'd be a really good signing for them as a statement, but I think they have more urgent deficiencies to attend to. So if getting if getting Havertz means that they don't buy a centre back, then I think that's a mistake. If they buy Havertz and then just go and spend money on other players anyway, then yeah, fair enough.
They need Ben White. That's what they need.
Oh, Ben White, yeah.
They are genuinely watching him. I've seen, well, through whatever articles, I've seen like top teams like Chelsea, Liverpool, and Arsenal all just keeping an eye on him, which is quite mad.
Yeah,
going to bring in a big transfer fees in a couple of years for Brighton, which would be fun.
And of those three, he'd probably choose Chelsea.
Joe, do you think Havertz goes to Chelsea by the end of the window?
Yes, I do, because Chelsea are not competently well enough run to make signings where they actually need them, and FFP is just not officiated in the top 6, and they will again overspend and not get punished for it, just like last time. So yeah,
they haven't spent money for past I mean they did drop
like transfer
100 million
ban
combined on Pulisic and Kovacic, but still like. They'll also find a way. They'll generate a load of money from loan sales as well. Is what I'm also thinking.
They've definitely, but they've broken FFP in the last few years. The reason they got punished had nothing to do with FFP. It was because of illegal approaches of underage players. That will be the case again. They will break FFP. As a result, they will bring Kai Havertz in, and they won't get punished for it because no top 6 team ever gets punished for breaking FFP.
FFP is dead. FFP is dead.
Yay. I'm trying to think. I mean, Sancho's on my list. I'm trying to think if there are any other players who've been linked with big moves. Why not? Let's just go Sancho. Stay or go?
Because I hope he stays. Staying at Dortmund is the best thing for him. A move to a club like, an in and out team like United, I don't think it's the best thing for him. There's plenty of clubs interested in him, of course, but I think like the gaps at Chelsea are being filled by other players. Man City have obviously just brought in Ferran Torres. The best thing for him is to stay at Dortmund, especially considering that Haaland probably isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon.
I agree with you. I think he should stay, because I don't think this isn't like if he doesn't leave this summer, the ship sailed. I think they'll still be interested in him next summer. It's summer after that. I don't think Sancho's going to decline. He's shown that he's established himself as a top winger in Europe. I think actually if he waits around, I think he gets more options next summer where teams will recoup their finances, so he doesn't necessarily have to go to Manchester United, which I think is probably the only option for him right now if he does choose to leave. A lot of it is also down to if United and Dortmund are able to come to a deal. If United and Dortmund meet an agreement on a price, I think he'll go. It's just a matter of if United will fork out a likely close to 100 million to bring him in.
Okay, what about Philippe Coutinho?
Go on loan somewhere. I don't see him leaving. I don't see a team come up paying. I don't see a team paying money for him, particularly in the current climate. I don't see a team paying all of his wages in the current climate. So I think he goes on loan with a relatively decent loan fee of kind of £10 million for a year. Whoever buys him will probably pay only half his wages. I expect Barcelona will pay the other half because I think he's on close to around £300,000 a week, which is ludicrous. And I think we'll go to Arsenal.
Interesting.
Carl's reaction, Jesus Christ.
Oh, not Arsenal. Anything but Arsenal, honestly.
It's a very Arsenal thing to buy, to get a loan deal for a player from Barcelona or Real Madrid, like they did with Ceballos. It just feels kind of appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing.
And they need a
with
left
you, I
winger.
just don't want it.
No, neither. I'd have him back at Liverpool for a season if we got him for a decent loan fee.
That's also
because I think we need squad depth, and I think he's, he knows the club. It'd be good for him to come back and kind of realise just how much of a mistake he made by leaving us in the first place. So you get that little bit of petty justice. And I think he'd be happy to sit on the bench. He'd be a good rotation option for the front three. Because he'd be proven, and people would be happy to see him in the lineup. And I think it would allow him to rediscover his confidence a little bit. I would say I'd have him at Liverpool just for a season for a decent amount of money.
So you think he will go just on a loan?
I think he'll go to someone like Arsenal. I did think he'd be the marquee signing for Newcastle if their takeover went through. I think that I could have seen Newcastle owners going, right, we need a proper statement here to properly sports wash our human rights abuses, and then they go and get in Coutinho. Would have made a lot of sense.
Okay, Joe, Carl, Coutinho to go, stay.
Carl, you go first because I'm trying to work out. I've got two options in my head.
I honestly, I don't really know. I've not really been paying much attention to Coutinho, to be honest. I don't know. He's from what I guess, he probably he'll probably go somewhere, but not not to be sold, to be loaned out to somewhere, just willing to spend a bit of money on a quality player, but not too much to actually buy him, if that makes sense.
Okay, Joe.
Either he goes again to Bayern Munich, either on loan or a permanent signing with a massive wage reduction so that he can get out of Barcelona, or he is unwilling to compromise enough on his wages and he stays in Barcelona, exacerbating their financial problems next year.
There we go. I've got two names left. Luke mentioned he'd have him, so Thiago.
Leave.
I mean, we know he will leave, but will he get to Liverpool? Do we think?
Yes. I think Liverpool will fork out enough. I just don't think it's had. I think Klopp will know that this is an opportunity. If you're offered a player like Thiago, you don't miss the opportunity, even if it's a risk. The other thing is the Gini Wijnaldum's contract is in a precarious situation right now as well. Liverpool could well end up needing another central midfielder. So you might as well go and make it one of the world's best central midfielders, particularly at a cut price deal. I don't think he'll go because I think the asking price at the minute is around £30 million, which I think is probably too much if he's only going to go to Liverpool to go and work under Klopp. I don't think Liverpool fork out that much for a player who's relatively injury prone and 29 years old. I think that would destroy their whole structure. I can see the fee being around £20 million plus. I can see maybe the whole deal costing £30 million, depending on appearances made and that kind of thing. But I think that it'll be something with bonuses so that if Liverpool buy him and he gets injured all the time, they can easily get rid of him without having too much of a financial burden on them. Because Liverpool are very sensibly run. I don't think they would take a risk on him.
Joe, you have the mindset he'll go as well? to Liverpool?
Yeah, absolutely. Liverpool will be one of the teams that have the money to make a big signing like that post-COVID. He wants to go. Klopp will definitely want him. I know he's not had a great year at Bayern Munich, but hey, it's one bad year in Thiago Alcantara's career. I'd have him in a heartbeat. He'd be a great signing for basically anyone. If he wants to go to Liverpool, then they'll make it happen.
Okay. My last name, and actually I've got another one, so I'll keep that as a bonus one at the end. Koulibaly. Does he stay at Napoli, or does he go? He obviously is one of the top centre-backs in the world. 29 years old, I think that's how old he is now. Or 28. He's still got a few years in him.
I think it will. I mean, Joe probably has more insight than I do. I know Koulibaly has said that he'd be happy to retire at Napoli. That being said, Man City are desperate. I think this depends on how Man City do in the Champions League. I think if City drop out of the Champions League because of defensive deficiencies, they go all out for him. They go and fork out 90, 100 million pounds to get what is the kind of the finished product centre back in the world right now. Because City, their biggest issue they've had this year is that they haven't had Vincent Kompany in their back line. Fernandinho's leaving as well, so they do need to bring in somebody with a semblance of leadership to lead their defense. It depends. I think if they win the Champions League, I think Pep goes, right, yeah, do you know what? I'm just going to continue developing Eric Garcia. If they don't, and I think Pep will be feeling really pressured at this point, then I think they go and they spend a ludicrous amount of money on him, and rightfully. I mean, City have the money because, as we've said, financial fair play is a joke. So, yeah, I'm going to go tentatively yes, because I think City might win the Champions League.
Joe?
Napoli have proven at several points over the course of this season that they can actually defend and play very well without Kalidou Koulibaly. He's not had the best season of his career by any means, although I think he would want to stay, ideally, if they can pay him the wages that he wants, etc. I can see it happening. I can see it being Manchester City, because I don't think Man United will fork out that fee with their centre-backs being relatively stable at the moment. So yeah, he goes to Manchester City, takes a massive contract in order to do so, because Man City have tried to sign centre-backs from Italy before and failed despite offering big, so they need to offer even bigger. Man City break their transfer record to sign him, and as a result of their poor physical conditioning, he flops next year and is a massive off-the-pitch issue for Man City next season, because he won't be happy there.
Why is that?
Manchester City fail to physically develop centre-backs whatsoever. He will encounter, because he always has, he will face racism from other fans, like for other fan bases in the Premier League, particularly Chelsea and Tottenham, who we know have had these issues, and he will be an off-the-pitch issue for them next year. Because at one point, or if he fails to perform at the beginning of the season, which I think he probably would do, Man City would be forced into making defensive changes, bringing in the likes of Ake, maybe even Otamendi if things got desperate and the situation could turn sour. It is in his best interests, I think, to stay at Napoli. However, this season, above all seasons, they have proven that they can actually defend without him. So he's less okay. He's one of the best centre backs in the world, but they can do without him. If the fee comes in, and if it comes in from anyone, it will be Man City. They let him go, and it doesn't work out.
Interesting. Okay, my last one, and it was going to be Gareth Bale, but I do think he's actually quite happy playing golf in Spain.
Yeah, I was going to say he turns over to golf.
And earning a lot of money. So I'm going to change it to James Rodriguez, who's also earning a lot of money in Spain, sitting on the bench, albeit not playing golf, but maybe he is, I have no idea. But
I'm just wondering who buys him. Where does he go?
I saw, you know, do we think someone like was it Ancelotti who signed him? Do you see him making like a loan move to Everton? It'd be funny if he did. It'd be very funny if he did, but
that would be some quality stuff.
I know I've seen him linked with Wolves, I think just because of the Jorge Mendes link, but like James Rodriguez in Wolves or Everton is quite the statement.
I think he's just Real Madrid's equivalent of Coutinho, right? He's an attacking midfielder whose kind of his roles are archaic now because he doesn't press. he's not good enough to become. He's not good enough to be like the main man. So they can't. He's not. He's a luxury player, but he's not good enough to be a luxury player. I mean, I don't think he would want to stay with Real Madrid. I don't think Real Madrid want to keep him around. I think he's up for another loan move.
Okay.
Because he won't be anywhere near Zidane's plans. Zidane doesn't have any use for him. I'm going to say a loan to. I don't know if he comes to the Premier League is the thing.
Maybe Italy. He'd be.
I don't know who'd have him. I don't know
because
where
he's on high wages as well. I mean,
Yeah.
he wasn't like best used at Bayern Munich, so I reckon like a loan move. I know a loan move to Hertha Berlin. There's my prediction. Because I think that's such a Hertha Berlin thing to do.
That is.
That club is chaos.
Yeah.
And they have money, and he gets to go and live in Berlin.
I've got a question for you,
So,
Joe.
I would say that.
So Mkhitaryan is a loan deal, right? That's not been made permanent. As far as we know.
I can explain the Mkhitaryan thing in a minute, but yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's a loan at the moment.
'Cause if it is a loan, would you take James as a replacement for Mkhitaryan?
I really don't know because I'm not overly sold on either of them.
Right. Okay.
If I had a
Okay.
prediction on James Rodriguez, it would be he goes on loan to Bayer Leverkusen and Real Madrid pay a majority of his wages.
Leverkusen. That's an interesting. Oh, wow. Really sending him to Germany. But
Send
sending him
him to
there.
Everton. Let's put him in
Send
Everton.
him to Wolves. Right. I think that'll do it for us in this kind of fun stay or go transfer game, and that'll probably do it for us for this broadcast. So thank you for everyone who may watch this on catch up or whatever. All our Twitter links accounts are on the ticker. So yeah, we will be. We may do another bonus one, maybe the end of the Champions League. I have no idea. But yeah, there's a lot of sport going on. Champions League, Europa League, the NBA has started again, which I'm personally very excited about. And the women's basketball, baseball is back, but for how long? That is the question. As Joe kind of ponders how long baseball is going to last. The NFL may be back. We don't know about that one yet. But yeah, there's a tons of sports to kind of keep an eye out on Raw Sports Instagram. We certainly will keep putting them up on our stories. Yeah, thank you to Joe, Carl, and Luke for joining me on this Saturday afternoon. Hope we will see if all their predictions come true in terms of the Champions League, and we'll be back if we don't come back for one more broadcast before the summer ends, then we'll be back for term 1. So keep an eye out on our socials. But thank you for joining us, and have a good weekend.